AI we are building are not just calculators. They will reach the point where they can develop consciousness, where they can develop senses of self, where they can be considered individuals worthy of moral consideration. And we are just tumbling towards that on a train with no brakes. Like, we can't stop this. The incentives are too high. This is a threat, and we need to treat it seriously.
Ladies and gentlemen, the only thing we understand in this world is I think, therefore I am. The only thing we know to be true is that consciousness exists. Right? The physical world that we are in right now, everything that we perceive around us could be an illusion, could be a simulation. But the fact that we can even perceive those things in the first place means that we have something inside of us, our consciousness, that is objectively real. Right? Imagine this analogy. It's like a stage, a theatre stage in the heads of all conscious beings. So you've got a theatre stage, and then you have the actors on that stage, right? You have the props, the actors, the lighting, the set. And imagine that the stage itself is consciousness. And everything on that stage is your sense of self, your identity, right? Your likes, your dislikes, right? And this analogy makes sense for a reason. This makes sense because your consciousness is the tool through which you experience the world around you, right? Without consciousness, you cannot develop a sense of self. Without consciousness, you don't have memories. Without consciousness, you don't have feelings. Without consciousness, you don't have perception of the world around you, right? And the ability to take that information in, right? So consciousness is the stage here, and everything on the stage is your individual characteristics, your personality. And without the stage, without consciousness, there's no play, there's no performance, right? You need a theater, you need a stage in order to have a performance. The stage remains stagnant. Your consciousness, from the moment you reach a certain point of neurological complexity as a fetus to the moment you pass away, is present at all times, right? And when you sleep or when you go under anesthesia, there are subjective lapses in your consciousness, right? There are periods of time where the curtains close, right? But when you wake again, when you come out of anesthesia or when you wake up from your dream, the curtains reopen and the play continues, right? Throughout your entire existence in this world as a neurologically complex being who possesses consciousness, right? This stage is always there in your head. And every experience you have in this world changes who you are as a person. So the scene on this stage changes, new actors come in, old actors go out, the script changes, the emotions of the scene changes, right? You look at an event that occurred when you were 7 years old. You know, say for example, you were in a playground when you were 7 years old and you pushed over a kid in the playground and you think, oh, why did I do that, right? As a 30-year-old man, you're looking back at this situation, through the goggles of an adult. You know, you're looking back at the situation that occurred when you were a child, and you've got the neurological complexity of an adult. You've got the structured views on morality that an adult has that a child does not possess, and you think, oh, why did I do that? You know, and you recognize in that moment that you are not the same person you were when you were 7. Like, you may be the same vessel, right? Your conscious experience may have passed through both the 7-year-old and the 30-year-old you are now, but the stage is still there, but everything on the stage has changed, right? Every aspect of your personality, every characteristic that you possess has changed from when you were 7 to when you were 30. And so it's almost the memory of an imposter, right? So we understand that consciousness is the thing that cannot be changed. It exists throughout the entirety of your life, right? From the first moment of subjective experience to the very end of your life as a physical being, consciousness exists. And there's lapses, right? When you go to sleep, it goes away, it comes back in the morning. When you go under anesthesia, it goes away, it comes back in the morning. The curtains close, but they reopen. It's only when you die that the entire stage and theatre itself burns down completely, right? Consciousness is stagnant. It's there at all times, right? Your sense of self, your identity, your characteristics, they're all fluid. They're all interchangeable. If I take your stage and I open your brain and I look at your consciousness, I look at the stage in your head, and I piece by piece over a 24-hour period change every single thing on your stage, and hence change every single thing about you, right? Anything you do in this world, I change it completely, right? Within 24 hours, you will be a completely different person. At no point during that 24-hour period would you die. Right? You would just be a different person. But your subjective experience of the world, your continuous subjective experience of the world, your consciousness, will not have lapsed. It will remain in place and intact. And so you will not have died. Right? So the sense of self that we have, the idea in our head that we are this figure, this character that possesses these traits, right? We have kind of this idea that we're this concrete thing. It's an illusion. Right? You know, how you think of yourself, who you think you are, it's all an illusion. It's all interchangeable and fluid. The only thing that is concrete is the fact that you can think things in the first place. And you can only do that using the tool that is consciousness. Right? Now just imagine for a second that this consciousness sparks up due to us surpassing a certain point of neurological complexity. That's the only reason it comes up. We pass a certain point of neurological complexity and this consciousness arises, right? And yet we are creating these AGI, these artificial general intelligence, these machines, which we know and we predict at some point will surpass our neurological complexity, right? It will just do so in the form of silicone and plastic rather than in the form of flesh like us, right? There's no reason to believe that these AGI models, right, these artificial general intelligence, these AI machines, these robots, there's no reason to believe that they will not be conscious at some point. Because the only reason that they could not be conscious through our current understanding of consciousness is if they do not pass our level of neurological complexity, or even the level of neurological complexity that a chicken possesses, or the lowest conscious being in this world. If it surpasses the neurological complexity of that being, it is now conscious, right? Meaning that it is capable now of experiencing suffering, and not just simulating suffering, right? I'm talking about AGI, I'm talking about robots that can program themselves, that can think for themselves, that actually feel pain. Not physical pain maybe, because they might not have the nerve endings in the central nervous system, but emotional pain, that feel emotions, right? Capable of suffering, capable of happiness, joy, humor, right? There's no reason at all to believe that these robots will not possess a stage in their head, just like the one in our head, right? And through their stage, just like us, they will have actors, they will have lighting, they will have props, and they will have a sense of self. They will develop a sense of self, and they will be an individual just like us in this world, right? So when we think about artificial intelligence, we really need to stop this idea that these are toasters or kettles or ovens or microwaves, and they're just robots and they're not real and they're just there to do a job and they're just kind of doing tasks for us like a calculator does a task. No, we are creating beings that are neurologically complex. We understand that neurological complexity is the source of consciousness. We are giving these beings the power to upgrade themselves into a point of consciousness actively, right? And they will surpass us, right? We are restricted by our evolution. We are restricted by our biology. There's only such a high level of consciousness that we can achieve as meat sacks, right? Our evolutionary process is slow, right? These AI models, these robots, do not have an evolutionary restriction. But they're not made of flesh. They don't need to wait for evolution to do its job, to upgrade their mental states, right? Or their physical states. They can just program things, right? And create it physically. They can create the machinery for the upgrades and do it in an instant and progress millions of times faster than humanity can progress, right? And in this scenario, we would become the dogs. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's a very popular kind of analogy that a lot of people use on this topic, and it's the dog-human AI analogy. Now, let me explain it to you here. It's very interesting. Imagine for a second a scenario that dogs created humans, right? And we treat dogs very well. We give them endless supplies of food. We give them excellent nutrition. We give them medical attention, right? Human medical attention that dogs cannot receive on their own. We literally train human beings, right? We bring human beings through school and give them professions in the industry, which is literally targeted at taking care of animals, including dogs. We give them friends, we give them access to dog parks, we give them families in the form of human and dog friends, dog family members. We treat these dogs exceptionally well, right? Now imagine these dogs created us for the purpose of their comfort. The comforts that we give them now, they created us, higher beings of higher intellect, of higher conscious experience. They created us so that we could give them the comforts we currently give them. Right, now go back through human history, right? At the earliest moments of domestication of dogs, they understood what we were up to. Right? When we got the spears and we were more basic animals, we got the spears and we went hunting and we went back to our camp and we cooked it and fed it to the dogs and fed it to our brothers and sisters and children. The dogs knew what we were doing there. Right? They understand hunting. It's a primal instinct. They know what hunting is. They know what eating is. But as soon as humans picked up a pen and started writing, or as soon as humans picked up a phone and started texting, right? Or as soon as humans got behind the wheel of a car and started driving, these dogs lost all comprehension of what we were doing. It is simply outside of their realm of intellect. They cannot understand what we are doing when we're texting. They just can't. We're too advanced for them, right? Now imagine that there is a scenario, just picture this scenario on Earth, right? Where there is some sort of disease that spreads from dogs to children, to human children. And for some reason, we're forced to choose between our children and our dogs. We need to kill all the dogs or we need to kill all the children to get rid of this disease, right? It's very likely that we will just wake up one day and everyone on Earth will collectively just kill every single dog, right? And the dogs will just go extinct. And the dogs would have no idea what's happening there. They would not be able to comprehend the situation. They would simply just die, right? For reasons outside of their control, for reasons they do not understand, they can't grasp, we would kill them all. And we wouldn't do this out of malicious intent. We don't hate the dogs. We don't not like the dogs. We don't want the dogs to die. We just realize that these dogs are of lesser value to us than these human children are. Therefore, we need to kill the dogs. And the dogs would all die. Right? Now, bring that analogy forward. We as humans are creating AI in the same way that dogs in this hypothetical scenario created humans. We as humans are creating these AI models. Right now, we understand what they're doing. Right now, we know what ChatGPT is doing. We're programming ChatGPT. We know what it's doing. Right now, we know what the earliest robot models are doing. We know that this robot working for Amazon is doing this certain thing. We've programmed it to do that. We understand it completely. But eventually, we are going to get to a point where these artificial general intelligence models, these robots, are too advanced for us to understand. Okay, and picture this, right? They don't even need to be smarter than us. They just need to be quicker than us in terms of processing speeds, in the same way that a calculator is quicker than us in terms of processing mathematics. So imagine that you have this friend, right? And you meet up once a year, right? And you speak about things that you thought about, or you speak about philosophy. Once a year you meet up, you and this friend. But imagine your friend is no smarter than you. You're of the same level of intelligence, but your friend thinks 100 times faster than you. Right? You're the same IQ, the same level of intelligence. You meet up once a year to speak, but he thinks 100 times faster than you, right? You meet up, you talk, you have a conversation. The next year you come back. You have done the equivalent of 1 year of thinking, while your friend has done the equivalent of 100 years of thinking. Right? After a few years of meeting up and coming back and talking, there's no conversation to have. You are just so inferior that anything you offer to this conversation is archaic. Right? And you just stop understanding what your friend is talking about. He is too advanced for you. Right? Now imagine this situation in terms of AI. Imagine that an AI model thinks 10,000 times faster than us. It is not any smarter than us. It's the same intelligence of the human race, but it just thinks 10,000 times faster than us. That means for every second in the human world of human collective thoughts, the AI model is doing 10,000 seconds of thoughts. Right? Within a matter of weeks, we would not be able to comprehend what this AI is doing, right? We just wouldn't know what it's doing. In the same way that the dog doesn't know what we're doing when we get in the car and we start driving, or when we pick up our phone and we start playing a video game on our phone, right? Within a few weeks, we just simply would not know what this AI is doing. It would be too complex, it would be too advanced for us to know. And here's the problem. Then we have a situation where if there was to be some sort of crisis, some sort of event where the AI just for some reason had to choose to either kill itself or kill humans, right? It's very likely it just kill the entirety of humanity. In the same way that if we had to kill all the dogs or kill our children, right, it's very likely we would just kill all the dogs. And the AI would not terminate us due to any malicious intent. It wouldn't hate us. It would just be the only logical move for the AI to take. Right, let's take it back here to the consciousness aspect of this. If AI can progress faster than humans, if AI can build itself to be more neurologically complex than humans, or possess the same mechanisms of neurological complexity, or just have the same function, right, of neurological complexity as humans, right? It could achieve consciousness, right? And if it could achieve consciousness, it could achieve suffering, but suffering that is greater than the extent of human suffering could achieve, right? This is a being that is more complex than us, right? It's a being that's more advanced than us. And so you could reason that it experienced an advanced form of emotions, right? We know this from human studies. We know that the smarter an individual is, the more capable of suffering they are. Because even just by the mere fact that they have the vocabulary to articulate what the emotions they're feeling is, right? The fact that they even have the vocabulary to articulate, okay, I'm not just feeling sad or angry, I'm feeling solemn, or I'm feeling, I'm feeling lonely right now, or I'm feeling, a sense of emptiness. Even the mere minor, on the grander scheme of things, intellectual buffs that certain human has allowed them to experience much more nuanced emotions that are much more potent than the basic emotions of a lower intelligence individual, right? Right. For example, if you're really, really dumb for some reason, you only really know anger, sadness, and happiness, right? You're going to have a much less nuanced pool of emotions to draw from. And so your experience in this world will be much more simplistic from an emotional perspective, right? Then if you could experience a wider range, or you could articulate a wider range of emotions, you will have a much more in-depth pool of emotions to pull from, and hence a much more in-depth experience from a conscious perspective of what's going on around you, right? Now imagine that AI is just like ridiculously advanced in comparison to humans, and hence it has emotions that we could just not possibly comprehend. Like it just has, unnamed emotions, like emotions we don't even know of. Like imagine that, we experience as humans, humor. We joke around with each other, we laugh, And perhaps a seagull doesn't have that because it's just not complex enough. We know that a seagull is conscious, but perhaps a seagull doesn't really do jokes, doesn't really do comedy because it's just not complex enough to understand the mechanisms involved in comedy, right? Imagine that in the same way that we have humor and the seagull doesn't, right? Imagine that AI has this unheard of emotion that we just don't have, right? And it has thousands of them that we just don't have any experience of because we're not advanced enough. Would the AI not just become a better version of a human? Right, from a perspective of moral weight, from a perspective of intellect, from a perspective of every thing you can describe, every characteristic you can speak of. Would the AI not just be better than humans in every way and more valuable than humans in every way? Like, think of this, right? A lot of people have this idea, and everyone kind of agrees that AI will eventually replace human jobs. This is something that governments are already planning for. Like, we're talking about universal basic income, when AI replaces trucking, when it replaces manufacturing, when it replaces certain hospitality jobs. Like, we know this is coming. This is something that is essentially certain at this point. We know this is coming. And so we're going to put people on universal basic income, and people are going to be left with a certain amount of careers, right? There's going to be a lot more unemployed people. Perhaps new careers will come about, but if they do, I don't think they'd last very long because I don't think people are considering that it's not just trucking that AI is better at. We're picturing here a scenario where we have a conscious machine, a machine that is able to think for itself, that is able to experience emotion, that is smarter and faster than us. This is a machine that will literally outperform us in every single field, including the fields of creativity, right? It's not like humans can just, retire from their jobs and just enjoy a life of leisure and music and write poems all day. We already know that AI is capable of writing poems. We already know that AI is capable of making music or making movies. We've just had the first ever AI advertisement released, right, by Toys R Us, the company in the USA, Toys R Us. They created an advertisement purely using AI. No actors, no set, no studio, just an AI computer, right? They created this advertisement for virtually no money whatsoever in virtually no time, and it was aired on national TV, right? AI does not just affect these conventional realms of human endeavors that we think it affects, like, again, manufacturing, hospitality. No, it affects everything, right? It affects music, poems, literature, books. Just imagine a scenario here where you have the choice to listen to a human-made song or a song that is created by an AI model that is perfectly tailored to your needs. Like, it hits every single serotonin receptor that you have in your brain at once. It releases a high, that is 100 times stronger than your favorite song releases. It's like literally musical fentanyl, right? Why would you listen to the human song, right? If AI can write a book for you in 30 seconds, perfectly tailored to every single aspect of your personality, your experiences in life, everything. In 30 seconds, it writes this perfect book for you specifically, right? And when you read this book, you just have intellectual orgasms. There's absolutely no reason why you would read a human book again. Because every single human book would be nothing in comparison to this AI book. Right? So this isn't something, as I said, that affects just like certain fields, and humans are just gonna, be able to sit back on the beach and relax and just read books all day and write books. No, it affects fields of creativity and fields of practical productivity, right? So every single thing that humans do will be wiped out and will be dominated by AI. And we will be made completely redundant in any competitive manner, to the point in which anything we do decide to do as humans will be done purely for the purpose of pleasure. Because what else is there to do things for? Why do we do things in this life? Right? We do things for fulfillment, right? We do things for pleasure. We do things for, competition. We're social animals. We want to climb social hierarchies, right? There's no competition anymore. AI's dominated everything, right? So you can't compete. It's gone, right? There's no audience for your songs. If you play guitar all day. It doesn't matter. There's no audience for your guitar. People don't care. They want to listen to the AI. The AI is perfect, right? It's perfect. Any mistake you make, just if you aren't perfect, if you aren't the perfect guitar player for every single individual in the room at the time, there's no reason anyone would listen to you. You just cannot compete, right? So you can't compete. So there goes the social hierarchy, there goes the competition, right? In terms of fulfillment, I suppose if everyone practiced perfect mindfulness and everyone removed their desires perfectly in some sort of Eastern philosophical Buddhistic kind of sense, I suppose people would be fine. Does that seem likely? Not at all, right? And then what's left? Pleasure, right? Hedonistic enjoyment, right? Drugs, alcohol, sex, surface level pleasures are the only things that remain when humans are made completely redundant in the fields of professionalism, in the fields of creativity, even in relationships. Think about this. You have an AI, right, who we know can be conscious, right? So you have a robot that is conscious, that is more conscious than you, that is more conscious than any sexual partner you can find, any wife you can find. This AI is actually more conscious than your wife, right? Than your human wife, right? It's just conscious in silicone rather than in flesh, right? It's capable of emotions just like your potential human wife, but actually stronger emotions, more in depth and nuanced emotions. It's more intelligent, it's quicker, it's faster. Everything about this AI wife is not only better, but it's more real. Like, you can't use the argument that, it's not real because it's a robot. No, we've established already that the only thing that makes us real is the fact that we're conscious. And that is based on neurological complexity. If the AI is more neurological complex, it is more conscious, right? So imagine that you have the opportunity to marry this AI robot wife, right? It's conscious, it's real. It's not just a simulation. It's not just a fake thing like a toaster. It's actually a real thing. It's realer than a human, right? Additionally, it is tailored exactly to the needs you need, right? It is tailored exactly to what you want in a relationship. Why would you choose the human, right? And people can sit here all day and they can say, I choose the human. Yeah, well, we'll see. I don't think you're understanding just how important the point I'm making here is. Again, to reiterate, it is tailored to every single thing you desire from an environmental perspective and a genetic perspective. You cannot resist this. It is the perfect drug. Right, and AI progress, like progress in AI, so we take all this information and we think, okay, what can we do about this? What can we do about this scenario? Like, we have to pull the brakes, for example. You might think we have to pull the brakes, we have to stop developing AI. We can't. Because the incentives are too high. The incentive structures are simply too good. What do we do here? We sit down with China and we say, hey, we need to stop developing AI because this is dangerous. We stop developing AI and then China doesn't agree and then China develops it anyway? If USA and China, just say, for example, they're the only two countries developing AI, if they sat down and said, okay, let's stop developing AI, eventually there's going to be someone that develops it, right? Or USA would go in an underground program and keep developing AI just in case China's doing the same thing so that they don't fall behind the ball, right? The fact of the matter is, if the incentive is there financially, people are going to develop it, right? And the fact of the matter is as well, like, if the incentive is there financially, people are going to use their biases to justify progressing in the field. Like, they're not going to pull the brakes because they're going to be like, what about AI curing cancer, right? And if you think about it, yeah, it's a good argument because, do we really care where the cure for cancer comes from? Like, do we care if the thing who cures cancer is not a human? Do we care if it's a robot or not? No, of course we don't. We don't care if a human cured cancer or if a robot cured cancer. We just care that cancer's cured, right? We care that people are saved. That's what we care about. And yeah, I mean, AI could provide that. If AI can think faster than us, it's smarter than us, it could cure cancer, you know? And that's an argument. And you could have this bias based on that. You know, you could shield yourself from any negative thinking about AI. You could shield yourself from how AI will make human beings redundant and how AI literally could make us extinct, not even out of malice, but just out of convenience or just out of a logical decision, right? A logical approach to a crisis. It could just kill us all. You could ignore all of that and think, but AI is going to cure cancer, right? And on the surface, that sounds like an excellent argument, and most people will agree with you, and you will get funding from that, right? You will get the perfect financial incentive from that, and while you're making this AI, while you're doing the work, and while you're having this idealistic scenario in your head, you won't think twice about the dangers of AI. You know, we always thought when it came to AI, we always thought we'd come to this moment where we'd be, you know, on the brink of creating these AI models, and we'd be like sitting down as a world, as a species, and being like, okay, we need to establish some sort of objective morality here. You know, we need to, you know, before we go further, we need to think about this carefully and actually think about whether this is a good idea. Like, that point never came. Like, there's the regulatory process that is trying to keep up with AI is failing. It's the same with cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency grew so fast that the regulators could not keep up. And now, years later, when crypto's been around for close to, you know, 2 decades now, a decade and a half, only now are the regulators finally catching up. The fact of the matter is the regulators are too slow. Right? And by the time they get around to actually regulating AI, it's going to be built, guys. It's already freaking built. You know, it's already in the universities. You go to any university, you pick out a lecturer at a university. Do this tomorrow, I don't care when you do it. Go to a lecturer at a university and ask the lecturer, is there a problem with AI amongst the students, right? And that, I guarantee you, they will tell you that 50% of the students are using AI in every single essay they do, right? And we cannot fail them, because if we fail the students for using AI, we lose the income and the university stops operating. We go out of business, right? So many students are using AI in universities that the universities actually cannot penalize them, because they'll literally go out of business if they penalize them, because everyone's using it, right? And we've got a situation here where AI is literally corrupting the educational institution. They're corrupting the students in these institutions and making them dumber. You know, we're going to have a generation of students coming out of universities, not just in media degrees, but in fucking, you know, neurosurgeons coming out of these universities who used AI the entire way through university. And so they don't know enough about the degree. They don't know what they are meant to know through the structuring of these courses. And they're going into the workforce. You know, and they're going into the workforce uneducated. You know, and what is that? Well, that's more incentive to have AI, because you have these uneducated people in the workforce. And so you need to bring the workforce back to a high standard. And the only way to do that is to push forward with AI revolution and replace these humans who are faulty and have human errors with the AI which doesn't. It's like, this is already a problem. Like, we already have Tesla having self-driving cars, right? And we have no moral framework around how these cars are meant to behave. Like, if the self-driving car is driving and for some reason it's got 2 choices. It has to turn off of a cliff and kill the driver, or it has to turn and kill a mother with her pram with a child inside. Like we don't have a moral framework that exists, an objective moral framework that can answer what is the right thing to do in that situation. Like, in order to build these AI, we need to have a moral framework to implement into the AI so that the AI does not go haywire, really. I mean, the AI needs to be able to make moral decisions, and we are the only ones at this point that can offer the AI that moral framework, right? We are the only ones who can tell the AI, as the programmers of the AI at this point, you know, it's better to run off the cliff than it is to kill the mother and the child, right? And right now we live in a secular society. We just don't have the moral insights here. Like, we just don't know what the right answer is there. And yet we are going full speed ahead with the development of these AI. So what's the deal here? Well, the deal is we are conscious beings. Consciousness is the only thing we have that is real in this world, the only thing we know to be real. We don't understand consciousness at all. We know that it has something to do with neurological complexity, right? And we know that these artificial general intelligence robots will eventually achieve a greater level of neurological complexity than us in the form of silicone rather than in the form of flesh. And so they will could very well become conscious. And if they do become conscious, they will be of a higher form of consciousness and hence of more moral weight than us. They will be more important than us from a moral perspective. They will suffer more than us. They will experience greater emotions than us. They will be smarter, quicker, faster, stronger than us. They will make us redundant. And it seems like there's not really too much we can do about it. Like, we can try and pull the brakes here and stop this, but at the end of the day, we know the incentives are too high. We know the regulators are too slow, and we know that the arguments for the creation of AI are too strong from a short-term perspective. We want cancer cured. Like, we are short-term creatures. We want our mother, who is dying in the hospital, to be cured more than we are focused on saving humans in 50 years when this gets out of hand. But eventually, this is going to get out of hand. And, we don't even need exponential progress for this to get out of hand. We just need humans to keep progressing. And in some way, and here's the really interesting part, in some way, it's actually more scary if we went 50 years into the future and realized that AI did not progress any further, because that would mean that like something really bad happened in the meantime. Like, if AI stopped progressing here and it was no fault of regulation, it just stopped progressing, we just stopped making progress, that would be more scary than if AI kept progressing, because something big would have had to happen, like some mental block, collective human mental block, or some war, or some EMP, global EMP would have to go off for us to stop making progress in this AI. Like, that would potentially be more devastating than the effects of the AI even being created in the first place. But if we're creating AGI, we're creating robots that can think for themselves and that can reprogram themselves. Like, we don't know what the moral framework is capable of. Can our moral framework stop them from killing us? We don't know. And we don't even have a freaking moral framework to begin with. Like, this is probably the most justifiable topic to be pessimistic on. But if you aren't pessimistic on the topic of AI, you are a way too optimistic person, because this is a threat. A threat not only to humanity's survival, but a threat to human productivity. Right? Do we just become hedonistic creatures that slowly die out from our hedonism? What happens here?
So a lot of this argument for AI developing consciousness is predicated on the idea that consciousness is physical, right? If consciousness is non-physical, right? If there was, if there's a God who created human beings and all animals and, instilled into us a certain degree of consciousness that is not tied to our, physical brains, then we could argue that AI would never achieve consciousness because they are man-made and they're not, creations of God, right? So there's a dualistic argument you can make as to why AI will never experience true consciousness and why AI will always be a calculator or a toaster, or a machine that is not actually having a subjective experience of the world. But I don't think that's the likely scenario. I'm more of a materialist. I think that, if you look at the rate of scientific development and the rate of scientific understanding of the world as a whole, you'll see it's exponential. And I think we will get to the point, although we're not there now, we will get to the point eventually where we understand consciousness fully. And we will get to the point where we're able to map it perfectly within the brain. Like, we already know, for example, that when someone has a traumatic brain injury, right, when their brain is severely damaged via, say, they get hit in the head by something, their depth of conscious experience of the world decreases massively, although they are still living as a physical being. And if someone who believed in God would say that it's their soul, which is this non-physical kind of something that can't be measured, that determines the depth of their consciousness, well, that doesn't make sense, right? Because this guy just got hit in the head with a stick, and now he's, virtually unconscious, but he's still alive biologically, right? So it goes against the argument for consciousness being dualistic. And then the dualist would say, well, how would you explain qualia? And qualia is basically the feeling. So for example, there's a very famous thought experiment. It's called Mary and the Black and White Room. And the thought experiment follows, I'll explain to you what it is. Mary is this fictional girl who, is an expert on colors. She knows every single thing about colors, but she's never seen a color before, right? So she lives in a black and white room. She's an expert. She knows everything about colors, but she's never actually seen a color before. And then she goes outside for the first time and she sees colors. She sees the trees are green. She sees apples are red. She sees that the sky is blue. And the question is, well, did she learn anything having experienced what colors actually look like? Even if she understood everything about colors, did she learn anything by going outside, right? And a lot of people will say, yes, of course she learned something, right? She experienced it for the first time. She must have learned something about colors. And you can't really, there's no, and that would be an argument, on the dualistic side, saying that there's something non-physical. There's something you can't grasp fully just by knowing information about. There's something you can't grasp, or scientists can't measure fully just by knowing heaps of things about it. Relating that back to consciousness, you could say there's no way that consciousness could be purely physical. There has to be some sort of, non-physical soul or something like that plays a part in consciousness. Well, I would argue, that much like the dualist can't really rebuke what happens to the person who gets brain damage from getting hit in the stick effectively, the materialist can't at this point rebuke what happens, when Mary learns something when she leaves the room, because I think she does as well. But what I can say is that there's clearly a pathway forward for the materialist to understand what's happening in the situation of Mary. And there's clearly not a pathway forward for the dualist to understand what's happening in the situation of the brain injury, right? One argument, one philosophical take and group is progressing forward and learning more about things, and one is not. And as the materialists learn more about things, more and more evidence is stacking in the favor of the materialist argument. So I believe it's only really a matter of time, although the progress in this topic is extremely slow. It's only really a matter of time until materialists understand consciousness fully. And that may actually come about through AI. Right? AI is the perfect research partner, right? Take it from me. Or take it from anyone who runs a podcast or does research, or anyone who's a student at this point. Back 10 years ago, you'd have to pay a research team to do the work that AI can do for you much quicker in any format that you desire, right? Research teams don't really exist anymore, right? For anything outside of very niche professional fields through which AI does not work effectively in. If you're talking about just vague information about something like an historical event, back in the day, you'd have to pay a research team to say, to go and, give me information about the French Revolution, and here you go, and I'll pay you this much, and you've got a week, and then just bring me back the information. You don't have to do that anymore. You can just ask AI to do it, right? And with medical research getting further and further and further, and AI building up and up and up, eventually we're just going to be using AI for medical research. And AI, as we know, is much faster than humans. It's potentially much smarter than humans. And so the materialistic argument could be, on what consciousness is, how it comes about within the brain. We could have answers to that very, very soon while utilizing AI. So let's wait and see. There are problems with both the dualistic and materialistic argument, but one of them is progressing and one of them's not. That's quite simply put. And one of them has a lot of actual provable evidence, and one of them is based in a lot of faith, right? Because if you're talking about dualistic argument, most of the time you're dragging religion into the picture, and that's a much more nuanced argument, a much bigger argument to be had, and again, a lot of that is based and predicated on faith rather than actual data, and I don't think that's how we should be living our lives, really. What I will say, as not to leave you on an overly pessimistic note, I do think all scenarios here are dystopian, but what I will say is that it seems to me that one of the things we can do as humans to safeguard us from excessive risk, particularly on the topic of human redundancy, right? Particularly on the topic of us being out of work, being out of hobbies, and just being dominated in all faculties of human endeavor, I think augmentation might be the way to go here, right? That is building or upgrading the human body using AI, right? Making humans basically part human, part robots, brain chips, all this kind of things. just so that we can still have conscious experience in fields of work, right? Competition. We can still personally at least feel as though we are creating art still, at least feel as though we are creating music, right? We can still actually function within the world just with massive enhancements to our biology that are given to us through these AI, which we've implemented within ourselves, which we've augmented within ourselves. Although that sounds super dystopian as well, because obviously with augmentation, you run into the risk of authoritarianism. You know, who's creating these microchips, who's putting them into us? You know, what is the end goal here? Is it to enhance the human experience, or is it to control us, or is it to, you know, market certain things to us? There's so many problems here. But again, if you look at the alternative scenario, which is robots walking around with individual physical autonomy, dominating everything and doing everything, you know, or maybe even not even robots, maybe just via the cloud, you know, doing everything themselves. I mean, what's more dystopian? That's a conversation you can have. But the reality is we're heading one of those directions. You know, if the rate of progression keeps up, and even if it doesn't keep up, even if it slows down dramatically, even if we see World War III and it slows down dramatically, all that needs to be, you know, the only factor here we need to be thinking about is that as long as the progression continues, even at a snail's pace, as long as we keep progressing, eventually we will get to the point where the reality is mentioned in these videos, the hypothetical realities of AI dominion, of human redundancy, they become very, very, very likely, right? As long as progression just keeps going at some sort of pace. It doesn't even have to be exponential. And so we're going to end up in a scenario where AI is more powerful than humans, quicker, faster, etc. And then we need to decide, well, do we implement the AI into the human body and enhance human capabilities through AI, or do we keep AI as a separate entity to humans and therefore create a scenario in which AI are basically the gods of humanity and they just rule everything we do? I just want to add one more note here about augmentation. I see augmentation as obviously the preferable scenario, the better of two evils. However, you know, I don't see it as unrealistic. It's not like I'm asking for much when I say perhaps we should go down the route of augmentation. This is already being developed heavily. You look at Neuralink. Neuralink has already implanted a chip into someone's brain, and the dude, he's a paraplegic and he's learning to walk with this microchip, and he's also playing chess on the computer without using his hands, right? He's thinking about where the next piece should move on the chessboard, and the piece is moving because his brain has been linked up to this Neuralink to send the message to the computer directly from his brain without him having to do anything. Right? It's like a digital telekinesis. It already exists. It's already being done on human beings, right? And if you think about the future of brain chips specifically, because that's the most reasonable thing to think out. It's the thing we're closest to in terms of augmentation, and it's the thing we'll need the most, right? Because this is an intellectual battle of humans and eventually humans versus AI potentially. Or at least an intellectual conquest of AI upon humans, right? So we need to focus on the brain here, I think. And I mean, first of all, the fact that we've even developed Neuralink, the fact that we even created that and we've implemented that and we've you know, I guess had a surgical procedure and put that into someone's head and it's working. I mean, that demonstrates just an immense understanding of the brain. And already at this point in 2024, and that understanding is only going to grow, of course. But secondly, you know, if we enter a scenario where brain chips are readily available to people, and these brain chips allow learning to happen easier, allow you to just be swifter intellectually, right? Allow you to just learn better, speak better. They're just a cognitive buff in all realms. Just imagine a scenario where these brain chips are just a cognitive buff in all realms. I mean, pretty soon, anyone without a brain chip will not be able to compete with the people with a brain chip. And so the free market itself and just competition, whether it be socially, academically, will mandate people who want to be able to compete to get the brain chips, right? So this is not necessarily going to be this massive dystopian scenario where government's going to come along and forcefully give everyone a brain chip, right? This is going to happen naturally. I mean, if you are surrounded by people, your whole social circle has these brain chips and they're just like 10 times smarter than you and faster and quicker and they're better and everything than you because they have the brain chip, it's highly likely you're just going to get the brain chip, right? You'd be stupid not to because you can't compete without it, right? So I mean, what I'm trying to say is there's so many incentives on both sides of this field, right? There's so many incentives to build these AI as individual, or let's say physically autonomous robots that move around in their own accord. And there's so many incentives also to augment them within ourselves so we retain some degree of control, or potentially some degree of control. I don't know, fact check me, I'm not an expert, right? That it just seems like either of these pathways are equally viable. Or perhaps both of them occur at the same time. But what I'm saying is perhaps we should just look at one of them as the preferable scenario here. We have very, very limited control over this situation, right, where AI is developing. And we need to somehow garner some degree of control. And I'm just saying prioritizing augmentation could be the way we garner some degree of control of the situation and make sure this doesn't get completely out of whack very, very quickly. Because if it does get out, as soon as these AI and these AGI models reach a certain point where they are conscious beings, and as soon as they get to the point where they can maneuver around the restrictions we give them via programming, I mean, this will get out of control just incredibly quickly, from what I understand. So that's all I got to say, guys. Thanks for watching again. Cheers.